Stewart, and tonight we're going to talk a little bit about smoking cessation. So how to quit smoking, why should we quit smoking, and how do we get from this point to that point? So we all know already that smoking causes cancer. There's over 4,000 different chemicals in a cigarette, and so those chemicals go into your body and they kind of alter your DNA in a way that allows for these cancers to take hold and inhibits your body's ability to fight against them. But there are some other things that happen that maybe you're experiencing more immediately, or maybe someone you know is experiencing more immediately, that is caused by smoking cigarettes. And we're going to look at those today really briefly. So first one I wanted to talk about is coronary artery disease. And your heart has on the outside of it, that muscle, different arteries that fuel the heart. So we have different ones, and if you've ever known somebody who had a open heart surgery or a stent placed, these are the arteries that they've probably had replaced or stented. And that's because they can get clogged up. They're not very big. They're about the size of a piece of wet spaghetti. So those can get clogged up really easily. So we're going to kind of zoom in here and look at what's happening inside of our artery. Now, in a nice, healthy, normal artery, our red blood cells are going to just go straight in and straight out of this tube. And they're not going to have any big issues there. But a couple things happen when we're smoking cigarettes. For one, the blood gets a little bit thicker, which is called viscosity. And then also it damages the lining right here inside the arteries. It also makes it sticky, so things want to stick to it. We have something, if you've ever heard of LDL cholesterol, so that's the bad cholesterol, if you've had your cholesterol tested, that kind of allows for that buildup to happen here. So as your blood is a little bit thicker and your cell walls are a little bit thicker, this starts to build up with plaque. And as it does, it gets harder for all of this to move through it because your arterial walls are diseased. So this gets a little thicker, and now our blood is having a little bit more trouble getting through. So our body's getting a lot less oxygen, so you might notice some shortness of breath if you're a smoker, right? That's one reason why. But also, the way this leads to heart attack and stroke is because if any of this buildup, this plaque ruptures and breaks open, all of that gunk in there fills up and a clot forms. And that's when you can have really bad things happen. That's why smoking increases your risk for a heart attack and stroke. Because if this then breaks free and travels up here, on your way to the brain, that's our brain today, this pink cauliflower thing, and that can cause a stroke. So that's one way that cigarette smoking is causing, coronary artery disease, peripheral artery disease can happen if you're in your legs, so you can get leg pain because you're not getting enough circulation there. It can lead to stroke and shortness of breath and heart attack and ending up to having these different arteries replaced. So that's no good. And those are immediate things that within just a year to 5 years of quitting smoking, we can totally reverse a lot of that. Now we've got carbon monoxide. So your red blood cells, they carry these little tiny things on here called hemoglobin, which holds our oxygen, right? So that carries it to the rest of our body. But one of the main ingredients in cigarettes is carbon monoxide. Well, these little hemoglobin guys, they love carbon monoxide more than they love oxygen. So what'll happen is the little carbon monoxide molecule comes along and says, bye-bye, I'm gonna ride on you instead. And if that's happening all over our red blood cells, all of a sudden we've got less oxygen going to where we need it. So you're getting more shortness of breath, you're getting winded going up and down the stairs because your body can't carry as much oxygen because it really likes the carbon monoxide you're giving it from your cigarettes. So that's another thing that we can reverse within 12 hours of our last cigarette. Then we've got COPD. Many of you have probably heard of that. This is an issue that's going on in your lungs, but it takes on two different forms. Emphysema happens at the very end of these bronchioles here, the terminal ends, they look like little grapes, right? So in your lungs. And these allow for all of the oxygen to get into your bloodstream. So this is where all of that exchange happens, where you breathe it in from the air and how it gets into your blood. It all happens in these. But what happens is, if you're smoking, it damages these little bulbs, and so they kind of get great big like that instead of being small. So when that happens, number one, there's less surface area for the oxygen to get through, right, into your blood. It also, because now they're stretchy, so if you think of a balloon and you stretch it out and it has that reflex, right? So you blow into the balloon, it blows up, and then it just comes right out. But if it gets overstretched and you blow it out, and then it just doesn't go back as much, right? So that's what's happening here when you kind of break away all these walls in emphysema. You're getting less recoil, so the air's getting trapped, and again, you're just not being able to breathe as well. You're gonna get shortness of breath. And then here in chronic bronchitis, instead of damage to the cells here, you're actually getting filled up with mucus. So now the air has less room, kind of like with the coronary artery disease, and there wasn't a lot of room for the blood cells to get through. Here, you can get the air in, but you have a really hard time getting the air back out because it's all plugged up with mucus. Hypertension is also caused when you're smoking cigarettes. The nicotine in the cigarette can actually cause vasoconstriction. So if you think about your veins being like a straw in this milkshake here, right? And so you take a drink of this milkshake and you have a great big vein, you know, you're gonna be able to get plenty of milkshake out of there. But if it were to be a coffee stirrer and you try to take a drink of the same milkshake, all of a sudden it's gonna be a lot more difficult. Nicotine causes this shrinking, this constriction of the vein, arteries and veins, and so you're not going to be able to get as much blood through as easy. So there's more pressure behind that, right? So all of a sudden your heart is having to work a lot harder. And blood pressure, hypertension, high blood pressure, is known as the silent killer because there's not always symptoms that go along with this. And all of these things are reversible. Within 20 minutes of your last cigarette, your heart rate and your blood pressure normalize. Within 12 hours, the carbon monoxide levels that we're fighting for your oxygen space over there on the hemoglobin, they stabilize and the oxygen is able to work again. Within 10 days, your cravings begin to go down to only 2 a day that last about 3 minutes each, so you know you're making progress. Within a year, you've cut your risk of heart attack or stroke in half, and within 5 years, your risk of stroke has declined as if you were never a smoker. So you can see that all of these things that, you know, we hear about every day and our friends go through every day, and we know there are immediate effects of cigarette smoking, all of these can be reversible by quitting. So why don't we, right? It's really hard. Nicotine is addictive, right? We start to smoke. Nicotine releases epinephrine, so it makes us happy. We get this rush of energy. The body reduces glucose, and that's where we get what's known as our smoker's high, right? It just feels good. Some of you may just, you know, you kick back at the end of the day and you have a cigarette and you're like, that's because that nicotine has released the epinephrine and your body's reduced glucose and you've got that high. You're feeling pretty good. But afterwards, glucose drops again. And you can get depressed and you can get tired and you just don't feel as good because that high is gone. The more you smoke, the more you're going to crave that high again, right? So you crave another fix, you have another smoke, and the cycle starts all over. And it might start out just 1 or 2, but eventually it's going to be 3 and your body's going to need 4 because it adapts to the levels you get it, and then it constantly needs more to get that fix. So that's how it's so easy to go from 1 cigarette to 5 cigarettes to now you're a pack a day or 2 pack a day smoker. It's because the cycle of addiction, it just traps you in it. But the good news is, like we said, if we can just get through even the first 10 days, your cravings can go down to just 2 a day. They last 3 minutes a piece generally. So if we can teach you the tools to break through those cravings, we can teach you how to quit. And that's why we're here tonight. So we have a nice little packet that we've put together to work with tonight and give you some ideas about how you can move past this cycle of addiction so that we can heal our bodies from all of these things and just move forward in a healthy way. So let's talk about some different healthy behaviors that we can do. This first part is called preparation. So at this point, we know that smoking harms our health, but we still do it. And we've talked about that cycle of addiction and how we can get stuck in it. But even more than that, think about some of the reasons why you might smoke. Is it just that relaxation? Is it the rush? Maybe you're just so accustomed to having something in your hand. You don't know what else you would do sitting in traffic if you didn't have something to hold in your hand. Things that we'll do today are try to figure out what you could have in your hand in a moment like that would replace that for you so that you can move past your smoking addiction. The more you know about why you're smoking, the easier it'll be to quit. So right now we're going to take some time with our packet, and you can share if you want, but you don't have to. List some of the behaviors you might have around smoking. So for instance, is it something you do while you're sitting on the couch, watching the movie? Is it something you always do after dinner? Do you always have smoke when you go out and walk the dog? Is it the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning? Do you have a cup of coffee and a cigarette around the same time? So think about some of the behaviors you have around smoking and list a few of those there.
I have a hard time when I get in the car. Every time I get in the car, I have to light up. It's like a habit, no matter the distance of the trip. I just have to have a cigarette when I get in the car, and they're right there in my center console.
Right, so we can write that down, and then we're gonna work for, now it will know what we're doing, we're gonna work at what we could place in place of that and give you something else to do in your car rather than have the cigarettes right there. The next question on this one is, how would you benefit today by quitting smoking? And we've looked at some of the ways that you could benefit. Just in 20 minutes, your heart rate and blood pressure is going to go down. But sometimes maybe it's the satisfaction of knowing you're finally doing this thing that you've been talking about for 5 or 10 or 15 years. And now today you're finally saying, okay, I'm going to do it. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's enough benefit for today, just to know that you're finally taking that first step. And then the last one you can take a little bit of time is to think about how you'll benefit in the future by quitting smoking. And it doesn't have to be something that we've talked about over here. It could be something like being able to play with your grandkids on the floor, you know, being able to go for a hike in the park without getting winded, little things like that. The last box on our front page here is measuring your addiction. And this just kind of lets you know if you might benefit from talking to your doctor about, you know, other therapies that might help you, because sometimes a nicotine addiction can be too much to go it alone. So these are just a few questions you can answer personally to see if this should be a conversation you should be having with your physician. The next page, excuse me. The next page is digging deeper. So just how we talked about certain behaviors around smoking, different environments and situations can make you want to smoke. So just like you were saying, every time you get in the car, they're right there. Maybe every time a certain song comes on, it just takes you back to this moment and you just know you need to have a cigarette. Maybe it's just the way you unwind after you've had a really big meal, maybe being stuck in traffic and you're stressed out and you're like, I really need a cigarette right now, and because they're in your console, that's what you can grab. When you know what it is that's triggering you to smoke, you can plan ahead and have a way to get around that craving. So we talked about a couple triggers. You know, maybe you know somebody who has quit already. Maybe talk to them and find out what they did to get around their triggers. So if they are somebody that you know smoked, you know, in their backyard every morning, and then all of a sudden you see them in their backyards in the morning and they're not smoking, chances are they still had a trigger when they were going out there. So ask them how they got around that. If you had a friend who always, you would go to the coffee shop and on their way out, they would light up a smoke, and it was just like clockwork every time. You just knew it was gonna happen. Ask them how they got over that trigger. So talk to people who have been through that. Try to figure out what strategies that they've used and that might be able to help you avoid those triggers too.
I think it's really hard, you know, when I may be triggered by going to see like a band that I like to play or going to concert venues, and though they've banned the smoking inside, which is nice, it makes it less desirable to do it, especially when the weather's bad. All the smokers hang out in the front, so now I'm set with seeing them the minute I walk in, and I want to join them and have a cigarette too. So it's almost like they're not out of sight, out of mind, I still want to have a cigarette because I can smell it and everyone's congested in front of the concert venue.
And that's where it's really important for you to plan ahead then, right? So you know it's going to be like that. So what can you take with you that might help calm that craving or that urge to smoke? Maybe it's a snack that you decide that whenever you have a craving, there's this healthy snack that you're going to have, or a drink of water, or you're going to take a walk, or you're going to sing a song in your head, or if you're stuck in traffic, you can blow bubbles in the car, right? So there's just different ways you can try to think. What might in that situation actually bring you joy, right? That isn't just lighting up a cigarette. What could you bring with you to that moment?
What about consuming alcohol and smoking? I feel like that's a really common trigger as well.
That is a very common trigger. So many people, are going to go grab a beer and they're going to grab a cigarette at the same time, but you don't have to, right? So plenty of people you see go to the restaurant and they'll have a beer and they don't go out with a cigarette. They're at a football game and they don't have both, right? So thinking about separating the two from each other. And in the beginning, you might not be able to. In the beginning, you might have to step away from that kind of environment just until you've got a little bit firmer grasp. It doesn't take a long time, a couple weeks, 3 weeks, just to pull yourself away and then go back. But if it's something you've already had on the calendar and you really know and you can't avoid that trigger, then try to change the situation that it revolves around and find a different alternative.
I have some friends that say that they only smoke when they drink, but sometimes I think that's an excuse because they're always drinking
right.
on the weekends, and I
right.
feel like that might be a denial thing. Do you come across that a lot?
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty common thing to hear, and I do think in a lot of ways it can be an excuse because we do see they might not be as deep in an addiction as somebody else, but just because you're not smoking a pack a day doesn't mean that you don't have an addiction to it. So anytime those behaviors are linked, our guards are a little bit down anyhow with alcohol, so it makes it really tricky and it makes us more susceptible to that. So that's why it's really important to have a game plan beforehand and know exactly when you go in, know exactly what you're going to do if this situation comes up. One of the things at the bottom of this page is to list some of the reasons why you want to stop smoking. And I have had people in the past write those reasons down and keep it in their wallet or keep it in their purse so that if they go to one of these situations, they kind of pull back. They might go over to like the ladies' room and pull it out and look at their reasons why to smoke. Because we know all the reasons why not to smoke, but we also know that a lot of us have done it so long, it makes us feel comfortable, it makes us feel like ourselves just because it's become kind of part of who we are. So we have to have a reason why that's a little bit bigger than that comfort zone for us. So writing down your reasons why you want to quit smoking and then keeping that with you could be a really big help when you're in moments like that that really trigger you to want to have a cigarette, even though you're trying to quit. We're going to keep digging a little bit. And just kind of start talking about that planning phase. So obviously, the more you know about what triggers your smoking, and we've talked a lot about different triggers already, the more prepared you'll be to choose something else. So we're going to talk about a couple ways and try to brainstorm together what might work for you personally. All right, so for an example, I had a lady who anytime she was stuck in traffic in her car, she would get frustrated, she would get nervous, and she would light a cigarette. So instead, she stopped keeping the cigarettes in her car, and she kept those little small tubes of bubbles. They're like this long, and they have a little thing. Usually you get them at party stores and stuff for birthday parties, and she would keep them in her car. And so if she was at a red light or she was just totally stuck in traffic, she would pull out the bubble, she would hold it. She had the sensation of holding something in her hand, that blowing feeling she got from blowing out the smoke, and that was able to just kind of get her through those cravings. So she removed the stimulus of having the cigarette available, but then, instead of dealing with that high anxiety and stress of not having a cigarette, she replaced it with the tube of bubbles, and she had great success. Now for you, maybe it's not bubbles, right? It depends on the situation, but you might be able to think of something that could fulfill some of those, behaviors in those moments. So let's talk about that. Where is a moment that you really feel like you're triggered to smoke?
Sometimes if I feel like something really bad happened to me, I feel a little, self-destructive. Kind of like how people, they want to eat something bad. They want to like hurt themselves by eating something bad when they're really stressed. I feel like I want to have a cigarette. I'm not really thinking about my health so much. I'm more absorbed into like what's bothering me. So that's a trigger.
Mm-hmm. What's a situation where that might have happened before?
Getting in a fight with a loved one.
Okay.
Argument.
So instead of when you get in a fight with somebody and you're really stressed out and angry, what's something you think you could do to maybe blow off some of that steam that isn't blowing, the cigarette?
What about these e-cigarettes? Do you think that would be something I could do instead, or?
I think because we really want to break you from the habit, and since there's still nicotine involved, there's still that addiction, right? So you might be missing some of the chemicals, but you're still getting the ones that are keeping you addicted. At that point, I would say, rather than go that route, again, meet with your doctor and see if he can suggest, some nicotine replacement patches to wean you off of it. But in that case, try maybe chewing gum, even if it's not nicotine gum. Maybe that's something that, would be helpful for you. Maybe chewing gum and going for a walk, or doing something physical, or, do a few jumping jacks, right? Something to just kind of blow off some steam that's involving more than one or two different senses at a time. So then you'd still have some of that oral stimulation with the gum that you would get with a cigarette, but then you also get some of that, the endorphins that you're looking for, right, from the nicotine, you can get from just doing some physical activity. So that's a great replacement for endorphins that's also really healthy. So what do you think if you were to get in a fight with a family member and you were feeling really stressed out? How do you feel about, throwing your shoes on, stomping your feet a few times, going out for a walk, going out onto the back porch, maybe chew a piece of gum for a little while and walk around and kind of throw your little tantrum that way, and then come back.
Well, I could definitely use more exercise, but I think that's a whole nother health problem in itself.
Yes, exactly. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, because some of the people who have been most successful with quitting smoking are people who have replaced smoking with physical activity. And we can talk about how to set you up with knowing where to begin, especially here at the YMCA, and just getting you set up with a program that you can feel comfortable starting with, so that you can start replacing these endorphins and that need for movement and stimulation that you have with something else that is a better addiction, right? Way better for you. So the next thing, after you take this home and you go through a few more situations where you're triggered to smoke, fill those out. And then in the box, there's a below that, and then kind of come up with some rewards. Let's say that you were in that situation with family and you got really upset, and you did go outside and you kind of walked around for a little bit. You had a glass of water, you came back in and you resisted that urge to smoke. You should have kind of a reward planned out. I'm not talking like a giant piece of chocolate cake, or like, let's go buy a brand new pair of shoes every single day when this happens, right? But just think of a little reward. Maybe it's calling a good friend, maybe it's, renting a new movie to watch, maybe it's, going out and getting a cup of coffee somewhere. But come up with a reward that you can say, hey, this was a triggering situation. I didn't have a cigarette, so this is a small reward I can give to myself, because this is a huge journey. This is a really hard cycle to break. So many people really try and struggle with this, that every single moment that you can celebrate that you've been successful with, you should. So that can be personal. It doesn't have to be something you share. And you can set bigger goals for longer goals. So if you've made it a week, you could set it a bigger goal. If you've made it an entire month, you could set up, something even bigger. Whether it's a haircut or trying a new restaurant or seeing a movie, there are a lot of ways you can do that.
I had a friend who would take the money that they were going to spend on the pack of cigarettes and put it away, and then they went on vacation at the end of the year.
That's a fantastic idea.
That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, yep. Definitely, that's a fantastic idea. All right, so the next day talks about our quit day. So the first step that you really need to do when you decide you're going to quit smoking is decide which day you're going to become smoke-free. So If you've already met with your doctor and decided that a step down, with nicotine assistance to get, medication isn't for you, and that you are able to go ahead and just pick a day and quit, then your goal is to just pick a day. There's a little commitment form on here. It's really brief. It just says, I'm committed to not smoking beginning on this day, and that you will remain smoke-free for the next, pick a number of days. And then once you've reached that date, how you'll reward yourself. And then the rest of this page gives you for day one, a 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 12 p.m., every 3 hours, an opportunity to just kind of check mark it, because you're gonna have to take baby steps. It's gonna be tough. You're gonna have your triggers, but part of this pamphlet is figuring out and making a plan for those triggers ahead of time so you're prepared, so that when you get to this quit day, you already have a whole book of stuff that says, okay, I know when I'm in this situation, I can do this. I know if I'm feeling this way, I can do this. So now you're on quit day, and you can look at it and you can check mark every 3 hours, and you can have rewards planned out for making it that far. And then continuing, the next page is your monthly calendar for your first month smoke-free, and just mark off every day that you go without a cigarette. All right, and you can use this little blank spot to write down a goal. Definitely take some time to plan. I don't think it's necessarily the best thing to wake up tomorrow morning and say, okay, I went to a smoking cessation class, and I'm gonna just go ahead and start tomorrow. Take the time to plan. Make a day, make the commitment, maybe 3 or 4 days out, and then spend time making the plan ahead of time that says, I know this situation triggers me. I know that I always have to have, a cigarette with my coffee, so what am I gonna do instead? Figure those things out ahead of time so that when you do begin and you start your first smoke-free day, you're really ready and you've set yourself up for success. I always say phone a friend, tell somebody when you're gonna, start your quit day, and then let them know, ask them permission for them to be the person that they call, their phone a friend, if they have a craving. So that you have somebody when you're out to drink with friends and they're having beers and they're all having cigarettes and you really want to have a cigarette too, you can phone a friend and this person will remind you of your why, remind you why you're quitting smoking. And usually if they can just talk to you for 2 or 3 minutes, that craving will pass. So always have a phone a friend kind of in the back of your mind that you've talked to, and let them know that you want to quit, let them know why it's important to you, and then make sure that there's somebody you can call in those moments that's going to talk you down, talk to you for 2 or 3 minutes, and give that craving some time to pass, because you don't have to do it alone. There are plenty of people that want to support you. But there are times where you might get a craving and you're not sure what you're going to do. So just like we've already talked about having a plan ahead of time, we also want to make sure that what we're going to do when it threatens to derail your progress. So first, you're going to go back to your planning page and look at some of the ideas you wrote down for when you're triggered. But I also want you to consider your most important reason to stop. So you remember when I said I had a person who cut out their reasons why, and they kept it with them, and whenever they had a trigger or craving, they pulled that out so they had it with them. Think about that. Think about what your most important reasons to stop. And those can be personal. You don't have to share those, but write it down. Make sure it's something that you have in your brain and that you can say, okay, this is going to be one of those things I pull out. Consider what you can do with your hands. So a lot of smoking, right? It's our hands need something to keep busy. So the one person had the bubbles that she was able to do to use to satisfy that. Some people, have gotten those little fidget cubes. Like my kids love the little fidget cubes. Some people really have had success just having something like that to play with whenever they have the urge to smoke. So what's something you can be doing with your hands? Do you like to knit? Could you pick up knitting? Do you like basketball? That would be a double whammy, right? You're carrying the ball around, but you're also getting in the physical activity. If a craving hits, maybe have a healthy snack. Try some veggies. Have something like heavy spice, like ginger, or clove. Chew on a clove. Don't swallow it, but chew on it, because sometimes that spice is heavy enough that it kind of takes that urge away to smoke that you would get from that heavy feeling of the cigarette savoriness. Talk to yourself like you would a friend. Don't be judgmental if you start craving a cigarette, right? Don't get all down on yourself. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm craving a cigarette. I'm trying to quit. You're gonna crave it. So go easy on yourself and think about how you would talk to a friend and motivate them through that type of a moment. Maybe turn on your favorite song, dance around the kitchen, put a puzzle together, all of these different ways to kind of take yourself out of the moment when you have those cravings. Remember that most cravings only last about 3 minutes long, and that even though they're really overwhelming in the beginning, by day 10, you're gonna be down to about 2 cravings a day, 3 minutes each. That's 6 minutes, and if you can find something to do with those 6 minutes, and you know ahead of time what you can do to get through that, then you're gonna have more chances for success. Just other ideas, get some water, download a mindfulness app on your phone. This has been another one that a lot of people have had a lot of success with. So there are apps you can download, and they're like how to take 15, 20 seconds of mindfulness, or small little meditations that are 2 or 3 minutes long. And you can download that on your phone and just kind of use that tool to kind of bring yourself out of the craving and into that present moment and kind of focus on that. We talked about going for a walk and just kind of moving, but just finding that type of an activity. So do you have any other ideas that you might have, like if you have a craving and, what could you do that involves, taking yourself away from the craving and bringing yourself to something that's more present? What else could you do?
I think surrounding yourself by non-smokers is a good start.
That's a fantastic start, right? So that's how we talked about earlier, removing yourself from the triggers. And being around other smokers can be a big trigger.
Yeah, there's nothing harder than you're at a gathering with friends and it's all your buddies who you started smoking with many years ago, and you're the only one that wants to stop. Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of, they all kind of look at you weird, or you're just kind of waiting in the house by yourself, and they're all outside talking. You're missing on the conversation.
You can feel a little ostracized there too. So again, having a plan for that going in, like what you're going to do instead. Phoning that friend. So maybe go inside and phone your friend and even tell them, this is really hard. I'm here at this party and everybody's smoking and I'm not, and just let them hear you out. Maybe just talking about it will be enough, and just saying it out loud and verbalizing it to somebody else that gets you and says, yeah, I get it, but you're doing this, for you, and it's good and it's right, and remind you of your why. That could be enough just to get you out of that moment and kind of reset you. So what happens if you do have a cigarette, right? You've already decided you were going to quit and you had one. Well, everybody slips up. So sometimes it takes a few attempts at quitting before it sticks, but it doesn't give you a free ride, right? That's not a free ride to just pick up a pack. It's not it's just a tiny slip up. It's not a relapse. So it does mean that's why it's important to sit down and have this packet filled out already, because you can go back through your plan and maybe something that you had figured out didn't really work for you. So it gives you a chance to say, okay, I have this plan, it didn't work, what would work better for me? So if you bought a pack and you still have one, throw it away. If you were at a social event and you bummed one, remove yourself from the situation, leave the party. Go back through the first few pages of this, remember your why, and then pick a new quit day. So do that right away, right? So you picked your quit day, you're 3 or 4 days in and you slipped up. It's not a free pass to say, well, today I'm gonna smoke the whole pack and then tomorrow I'll start again. No, stop right now, get rid of the pack if you bought a pack, leave the situation you were in if you were in a situation where you bumped a cigarette, then go back through these pages and pick a new quit day right away. Go through, figure out what plans worked and what didn't, and then figure out what happened. Where were you? What were you doing? How were you feeling? Understanding those details can help you figure out, what derailed you. Maybe it's something you didn't even think to plan of, and now you know. So now you're gonna make a plan of how you'll combat that urge that next time that happens, when you're that place, doing that feeling that way, you're gonna know. So there's a little packet on here where it says, next time I'm in that situation, instead of smoking, I can. And this is your opportunity, if you slipped up, to say, all right, next time this happens, I'm gonna do this instead so that I do not slip up. So there are a few ways to think about staying smoke-free. Keep keeping our plan handy. So everything that you're going to work on in this packet is going to have your reason for quitting, your plan for triggers, how you'll cope with those situations, who you're going to call in those situations, and allow this guide to kind of reinforce your decision. So go through it often and say, okay, that's my why. This is my person. These are the people. These are the situations that I need to avoid. These are the things that might happen that I need to do differently. So you have this with you. Some people might need medication, like I've said before. You might need to talk to your doctor about, medicinal ways to quit smoking, and that's okay. That's why they've created different programs to help you cope with this addiction. So contact them and see if this could be right for you, if you're really, really struggling. So another thing we can do is learn to stay calm. Maybe you tend to reach for a smoke when you're tense, so there are ways to cope with tension. We've talked about the mindfulness app, so having a mindfulness app on your phone could be another thing. You're at work, you just had a stressful meeting, everybody's going out for a smoke break, but not you because you've quit smoking. So what do? Maybe you have this mindfulness app, maybe you have a game on your phone and you sit, and that's something that you do in place of that, right? Just to keep yourself calm and to decompress. Reward yourself. Remember, every milestone deserves, celebration. Quitting is really hard work. So predetermine some ideas for rewards, like movie nights after a week. Maybe you get a new pair of shoes after a month or two with the money you've saved from not buying cigarettes. When you get a craving, practice the 4 Ds. This is in our pamphlet too. Delay, right? So most of the time, these cravings only last about 3 minutes. Take deep breaths. Take a drink of water, and then do something else. And the something else are all of those plans that we've talked about up to this point, all of the different things you can do in place of that. Say no. So practice saying no. When you're at that party and somebody offers you a cigarette, if you have not practiced saying no, chances are you're going to say okay, right? So practice saying no so that it comes a little more naturally. You can be polite and say, thanks, but I quit. Or you can just simply say, no thank you. You just gotta find out kind of what feels comfortable for you. So like we've said, you don't have to do it alone. Make sure you have a support person. Maybe they can be the person you call when you're tempted to smoke. Maybe they can just be somebody that you vent to instead of having a cigarette. Like we said at that party, you go inside, you call them, and you kind of vent to them about how it sucks that everybody's outside smoking and you don't get to have a cigarette. Maybe that vent sesh is all you need, right? That could be a great replacement, a great distraction, a great delay to get through that moment. Be your biggest cheerleader. So don't go down on yourself when it's hard. It's gonna be hard, but really cheer yourself on and motivate yourself through it. Just kind of picture yourself as a non-smoker by role-playing the social situations that come up. So this sentence is, for instance, if you go to the concert and everybody's smoking there, right? It might be beneficial for you to picture yourself as a non-smoker at the concert ahead of time. What do you look like? What are you doing? What are you doing? Everybody's smoking, but what are you doing? Are you going over this way by the concert? Are you gonna go check out, the band merchandise instead? So what are some things that you can already picture yourself doing other than smoking at this